You're watching the Eternal Tournament Series.
Welcome back to the Eternal Tournament Series, Season 5, Week 6. We got Round 3 coming up for you. I am Calimdir, also known as Gabe, and I'm joined by my co-caster, LocoPojo.
Yeah, we got a nice roundup for you today. It is Praxis Horn midrange versus just a standard Praxis midrange. And we got some really exciting things going on in both decks. Grapefruit is running a Shepherd's Horn heavy build with one other horn in there, the Flame Stoker, which creates 5/5 Infernuses every turn. Really solid way to gain a bunch of life and sort of get a lot of solid value against other types of decks. Against the Praxis, he's up against a Praxis midrange list, which is running, of course, the standard 4 Heart of the Vaults, Predatory Carnosaurs, Shatterglass Mages, Sandstorm Titans, all of the Praxis good stuff combined with a couple of Flame Blasts to finish out the game. Should be a really solid matchup against these two different decks.
Yeah, Paradox is running basically the same list that we saw in the last two ETSs, although he's got one more Flame Blast and one more Heart of the Vault. I'm trying to figure out right now what cards he actually cut from the list to add those cards. I think he cut Diogo, I believe, is one of the cuts. If you're familiar with the list I'm talking about, that was in the past two ETSs.
No, I don't think I've seen it. But we do see one Diogo in Grapefruit's list and none in Paradox's. So with everything set up there, that's going to look pretty solid for him. I don't think Diogo's particularly necessary for either deck, but should be interesting in Praxis Horn in particular, just to give all of those cheap Overwhelm units charge and double damage if you can get it to the late game.
Yeah, Diogo's just helps you grind out against some of the more heavy control decks. But yeah, I think both players are set up. I think I'm going to go ahead and cue them to start. How do you feel about these opening hands?
The opening hand for Grapefruit is clearly not very strong. He's only got 1 power, and that means that he's definitely going to throw that back. Not really a lot to be said about it. You often want to keep the hands with Shepherd's Horn in them when you have them, but for 1 power, that's just not good enough. So we're not going to see that happen. Instead, it's going to be, it looks like both hands are probably tosses. Amber Monument, Seek Power, Temple Scribe is kind of a play, but it's looking a little rough on both sides.
So which deck do you think has the advantage here? The just traditional Praxis mid-range, or do you think that the value generated from maybe the Flame Stoker Shepherd's Horn variant might be better in the mirror?
Flamestoker can definitely create some interesting surprise situations, but it's pretty bad against, in particular, the Praxis mid-range matchup, just because so many of the Praxis units have 6 health. You've got the Sandstorm Titans, you've got the Heart of the Vaults, and just those two alone tend to create enough blockers to make that situation very untenable for the Flamestokers to actually get the value that they want to get. That doesn't mean you can't push through them with cards like Obliterate and Torch, and it does put your opponent on the defensive, so there's a lot of high value that you can get out of those cards, but I'm not certain that the life gain is going to be enough to stop the more aggressive Praxis deck, and if the Shepherd's Horn doesn't go off, this deck is just a little bit less reliable.
Yeah, I kind of agree for the most part. I think Diogo, if they get into a board stall situation, Diogo could push Grapefruit's deck over the edge, but I think Paradox on the more traditional Praxis mid-range is going to be playing out relevant threats more frequently, and I think he might just end up overwhelming the board because he's got the Obliterates and the Flame Blast to clear the way, and then just get in there for damage. Whereas Grapefruit's going to just be drawing Horns and Flamestokers, which might have no impact on the board.
Yeah, it's going to be a rougher game. So we're already into the round. Grapefruit has a Torch up, and he's actually gotten his Shepherd's Horn activated this turn, which is a big advantage. If you can get that horn down in the first 3 turns, then that's really going to help you out for the rest of the game. He doesn't have any Overwhelm units to play out with it at the moment, but he does have a Xenon Obelisk to follow up, which is going to match the Dawn Walker in terms of tempo advantage. I think Grapefruit is probably going to be looking pretty good if he can draw any sort of card. The fact that he has Heart of the Vault playable on turn 6 means that he's probably okay, even if he doesn't get anything good this turn.
Yeah, I mean, he'll be all right, but Paradox is putting out a lot of tempo here. He accelerated with the Initiative stance. He's going to play this this Rhinark now. Grapefruit with a Rhinark of his own, and removing the Friendly Wisp makes things quite a bit better for him. But the one thing we didn't talk about is that Grapefruit's deck has Obelisk, and Paradox's deck does not. So that is the one place where you can kind of gain an advantage. Even though Paradox actually has removal in the form of Flame Blast and Obliterate, if both players are actually able to get out units of the same size, Xenon and Obelisk will give Grapefruit the advantage in combat, and that will crucially put Flame Stokers to 6/6s, which become very difficult for Paradox's deck to block.
Yeah, it's going to be a rough deal if he ends up in that situation. We are seeing the Heart of the Vault come out, torching the Initiative Sands and providing with him with a very reasonable blocker. He can see the Heart of the Vault on top after Seek Powering, which means that he's going to have the ability to play that again and get more card advantage drawn. In terms of the Praxis mid-range matchup, the person who draws more Heart of the Vaults is definitely pretty well favored, so we'll see if that ends up being good for him here.
Yeah, so Paradox having to take a turn off to play the Obliterate gave Grapefruit all the space he wanted to play as Heart of the Vault. And now, yeah, the 10 health advantage is big, but it doesn't look all that important anymore.
It's going to be a rough deal. So we have Sandstorm Titan coming down. Paradox is looking to be in some trouble. Flame Blast is not a good card against Shepherd's Horn's life gain. So if Grapefruit is winning on board, he's also winning on life total over all of the stuff that he's going to be playing. Like what Paradox really needs to do is establish a board advantage. And with Flame Blast, it's not really going to help here. It's not big enough to get rid of the Heart of the Vaults. And the second Heart of the Vault in a row means that Grapefruit is just really setting up on value.
Yeah, and the Obelisk is really doing a lot of work here, because otherwise Paradox would be able to Xenon Initiation this Titan, make it a 6/7 and kill a 6 Heart of the Vault. But at 7/7, it's just not an option.
Yeah, it's looking pretty rough here. He gets to play Initiative Sands and maybe Chump Block, or he can play the Rhinarch and create a double block, which
and he gets the Dawnwalker back.
But yeah, it'll do okay for him. He's looking at a lot of different potential problems, but he might be able to push through and win the game.
Yeah, and so here's the fun combo of Cult Aspirant and Shepherd's Horn.
Yeah, we're seeing Cult Aspirant. Shepherd's Horn is always a good card. It's just a 2/2 and then 3 life gained. Obviously, Grapefruit's main goal here is to just be above Flame Blast range, so as long as he can do that, he's going to be in pretty good shape. Providing some pretty consistent value for Paradox, but Paradox does not have the ability to recover the life that he's losing. So if Grapefruit pushes with both Heart of the Vaults, which he's apparently not doing, he's going to have a harder time.
Yeah, and now he's at 8 power, so the Obelisk is giving +2/+2.
Double Shepherd's Horns means, yeah, that Cult Aspirant is actually a 4/4, or it's not double Shepherd's Horns, it's the Xenon Obelisk, which is just activated and put everything at 8/8.
Yeah. I would love to say that Shepherd's Horn and all the cool stuff is really having an effect on this game, but I feel like the story of this game so far has been Grapefruit drew is +2 Heart of the Vaults over Paradox, and he's got a Xenon Obelisk. So this is kind of rough for Paradox, who's still stuck at 5, and now his removal does not remove these giant units thanks to Obelisk.
Yeah, it's going to be a pretty rough day. So we see the Obliterates for Paradox are certainly a possibility, but it looks like this is not going too great. He's got the Obliterates on the Cult Aspirant. He's got Xenon Initiation. There's just no particular way that he can push through this board. He can continue to hold up a decent defense, and it doesn't look like Grapefruit's too willing to attack into it. But Shepherd's Horn is going to provide a lot more consistent value, and Paradox doesn't even have the ability to draw into a Heart of the Vault at this point.
Well, it's going to provide a lot of life gain. I think the play here is probably Xenon Initiation on Dawnwalker, kill the Cult Aspirant, just to try and generate value as the game goes on, and because you can just still hold the double block. But it's definitely not a super tempo play because it doesn't deal with these 8/8s on the board, and I'm not sure how Paradox is going to get through that. Potentially, if he does set up the killer Dawnwalker now, if he draws another 5 attack unit and gets the Dawnwalker back, he can then use the Dawnwalker in tandem with Obliterate or Flame Blast to remove these 8/8s.
Yep, that's a lot of stuff to ask for the kind of value that he's trying to generate, but with an Initiative of the Sand as a potential chump blocker with the ability to at least double block the Heart of the Vaults, he might be able to win out a little bit on value. He does need to get rid of the Cult Aspirant here. Like, that card is just too dangerous with the Shepherd's Horn on the board. So with that and the Initiative of the Sands, he does end up playing it out that way. He's got a lot of damage in hand, but obviously the life total on Grapefruit is only going up until such point as Paradox can win the board.
Yeah, and Grapefruit with a Dawn Walker of his own coming out now.
Yep, he's
6-3 Dawn Walker, pretty threatening.
Yeah, he chooses to swing in with the Heart of the Vault here, take that not so great value trade, but also get a full 8 damage in. Paradox leaves the initiate on the board rather than chump blocking with it, which is a solid way to make sure that your Heart of the Vault draw actually works out. At this point, Paradox is in a lot of trouble. The Obliterates can help out with the Dawn Walkers, but obviously that card is going to come back. And he still doesn't have a way to deal with the 8/8 in particular. If he plays his Sandstorm Titan, he has a good double block against the Heart of the Vault, but the Dawnwalker is still going to present a significant problem for him. Like that Xenon Obelisk is just really messing with all of the math.
Yeah, I mean, you want to draw Heart of the Vault in this situation, right? But Paradox still only has 2 time influence, and it doesn't even kill the Dawnwalker. The Dawnwalker has 3 toughness right now. That's just absurd. The best card in the deck is actually not even that good right now. Paradox is in a really frustrating situation.
Yeah, if he can obliterate the Dawnwalker, that will help him out a little bit next turn. The other option is to use Dawnwalker to kill Dawnwalker, which certainly could be the appropriate play. He's going to take some damage this turn unless he chooses to create a block, though. He's considering attacking with a 5/5, which I don't mind. Like, I think that's actually a decent play. It forces Grapefruit to either consider blocking with the Dawnwalker or to at least take 5 damage and get a little bit closer to potential Obliterate Flame Blast lethal after an attack. So if he plays this defensively, he takes 6, he blocks with the 1/1. He has a potential out in the form of Obliterate or Flame Blast after a full attack on board next turn.
So what Paradox is doing here is he's conceding that he's going to chump block with this initiative stance. So he's saying, I want to get in some damage. I'm okay with chump blocking because there's no way I'm blocking this Dawnwalker anyway. And the double block, I don't care about this turn because I have a chump block available. So he's just taking this opportunity where he has the chump block available to get in this 5 damage. Because there's no way he's dealing with the Dawnwalker. He can't give up any of his 2 units. It's just they're too valuable right now.
Yeah, Grapefruit's card here is a Torch, which is definitely good against the Dawnwalker, and probably means that he will be in decent shape. No, it actually looks like Paradox has the game. The Torch is not good enough. Torch will kill the Dawnwalker, but now Paradox has the ability to play Flame Blast or Obliterate for lethal, and he found a way out of that fairly bad situation.
Pushing through 5 damage. I mean, there's the uncastable Heart of the Vault, but you know he didn't need to cast it. He found a way to push in that extra 5 damage. When all of your units have like 5+ attack, people can drop really quickly, and Grapefruit just got a little bit too careless in regards to burn and how much of a crackback Paradox could have, because he just maybe thought too much about how dead Paradox was the next turn.
Yeah, there was a very clever attack there with that particular dinosaur. At that point, like, he was offering like a pretty bad trade for the Dawnwalker, but it's possible that Paradox should have taken it and just tried to play a little bit more defensively. The deck obviously does have a lot of burn, and Paradox has the ability to sort of, or the Horn deck has the ability to recover a little bit better from the actual health gain loss. So yeah, it was a tricky game, and certainly played very well on both sides.
Yeah, I thought that game was actually very cool. Paradox took a risky line there because he was dead to basically any life gain, or the other player blocking differently. But you know, he made a gamble and it paid off, and I thought that was a really cool play.
Worked out very well for him. So we're looking at Praxis versus Praxis Horn now. Shatterglass Mages are, of course, coming in to knock out those Shepherd's Horns. And the
Obelisks more key, I think.
Yeah, the obelisks are quite important as well. I think both cards are really, really important to get rid of if you can get rid of them. And if you can do it while incurring a bunch of value off of Shatterglass Mage, that's a big swing in the Praxis deck's favor. Like I said, I do think that the Heart of the Vault, like the non-Horn deck, has slightly more options as far as just like removing threats and just getting the amount of value that it needs to win the game. Winning that first round was really good because now it gets to go into sideboard and run in a bunch of tech against the more focused strategy, or at least the more complex strategy of the Shepherd's Horns and the Flamestokers. Like, once you have the ability to deal with that particular issue, the deck becomes a lot less scary.
Also, Paradox has 3 Groundbreakers in his sideboard, which might come in here. That would be pretty interesting.
Yeah, Groundbreaker is a really interesting card. I'm not sure that either of these players are going to be running them. They're certainly additional units, and since you have the overwhelms and all of that stuff going on, that can be very helpful. They trade well with the Sandstorm Titans, which is really important, and they trade okay with Heart of the Vault, which is certainly not bad. Both players are running 2 Predatory Carnosaurs, which are definitely a card that you want to be swinging in as well, and probably has a little bit more value to offer than the Groundbreaker in these situations.
Yeah, Paradox elects not to bring in the Groundbreakers. They would have been good versus Horn and all, but I don't think he's particularly threatened by Horn. He's got the Shatterglass Mages, and he thinks that, he saw last game there was a Horn on the other side of the field, and it didn't end up doing too much. So I think he feels all right without the Groundbreakers.
Yeah, I mean, he's got 4 Shatterglass Mages. He's probably even expecting the Horn deck to play a few less relics, just because those 4 Shatterglass Mages are in the set, and that's such a big deal if they come down. But I don't think that the other deck actually... I don't think Grapefruit has actually taken out any of his relics. I think he's running the full Horn plan, and this is going to be not a full Praxis off, but Horn versus Praxis yet again. And yeah, I think Paradox is maybe favored to win this just on account of having those 4 Shatterglass Mages. That can be very, very solid in this situation.
Yeah, I think he was favored in game 1. And I think he's favored even more so in game 2 just because the Shatterglass Mages deal with the obelisks. And Shepherd's Horn is a super cool card, but Call Aspirant and Shepherd Horn don't do a ton in this matchup just because of the size of the units on the board. And Burn, yes, Paradox is a burn deck, but it's not a traditional burn deck where you're just trying to edge in a little bit of damage and then, get your board cleared, and after your opponent stabilizes, burn them out. It's more like you have these huge life swings, and you can those help facilitate the huge life swings, and so the life gain is slightly less relevant there. So I think Paradox is going to be drawing more live cards.
Paradox looking at a turn 3 Sandstorm Titan. That's a really big deal, since Grapefruit's turn 3 is almost certainly going to be Shepherd's Horn. We see instead a Amber Acolyte coming out just to make sure that he can stabilize against the Titan, and that puts him really on the defensive. He's going to be chump blocking with his 2/1s and his Temple Scribes and just sort of like setting up very, very slowly. I don't think he's going to have a great opportunity here to recover the board until he can deal with the Sandstorm Titan effectively.
I think he just needed to play the Amber Acolyte because he just doesn't have that much power. He needs to keep drawing power, so he's going to probably be trying to look to play a Temple Scribe here and just hope to survive until next turn.
Yep, the Waystone Infuser helps a lot. It's certainly a good value card, and it can block the Sandstorm Titan, although obviously with Paradox having a Heart of the Vault in the hand, that could be very tricky for him. Grapefruit choosing, or thinking about choosing, to play his Amber Monument. That means he can play his Shepherd's Horn down. And now Obliterate gains him 3 life back, which is a good way to sort of help stabilize.
Yeah, I mean, he's facing down a lot of damage here, but with the Heart of the Vault coming down next turn. But yeah, Obliterate gains a lot of ground, gives him a lot of space here. He doesn't have any Overwhelm units to start gaining life off this Horn other than the Obliterate that he just played there. But yeah, he had to play that Monument last turn, so he was able to play the Waystone Infuser. And now he's just going to be dead. He's going to play this Infuser. The Displacer is going to come down, remove blockers. He's going to go to 3, maybe? Or go to 1, I think.
Yeah, there's going to be a rough turn for him for certain. If he plays Temple Scribe and Zenith Obelisk, he might be okay. But Heart of the Vault off of just kills the Initiate, gets him a decent blocker, and it's really not something that Praxis Displacer wants to bring back into play. Like, if you drop that, then your opponent gets a card draw. That's a risky play, but Paradox is looking like he's going to go for it.
Yeah, I mean, the play does put Grapefruit at 1 next turn, right?
Yeah, he's at 2 right now. Heart of the Vault comes down. It blocks the other Heart of the Vault, and then it kills the Praxis Displacer. Paradox is bluffing like a Torch or some sort of burn spell, which is certainly a possibility. But even if he doesn't have it, he can swing in, and Grapefruit will go to 1, and that'll put him in a very tough situation. Grapefruit now has to consider if he wants to play Heart of the Vault again or go for like a Temple Scribe chump block with a Waystone Infuser kicker. Just try and basically like stabilize without actually helping the board out as much as he wants.
I don't even know that it's a bluff. I think he might just be hoping to draw into the burn. I mean, he may have even brought in the 3rd Flame Blast from his sideboard.
One cool card that he can pick up off Heart of the Vault here is Cult Aspirant. If he has a Cult Aspirant, he can play... Oh, no, that doesn't quite work. But he might have been able to play like the Shepherd's Horn into a Cult Aspirant and actually get like a ton of life gained out of that. Paradox does not pick up his burn, so we're seeing a trade of Heart of the Vault, and At this point, the Praxis Displacer bringing the Heart of the Vault back into Grapefruit's hand twice might really come back to hurt Paradox. He needs to get into a situation where he can actually get that one remaining damage. If he draws the Obliterator or the Flame Blast, that's definitely going to do it. If he doesn't do that, well, we're seeing the Flame Stoker out, and we have the Horn next turn. So Grapefruit has 2 turns to draw some sort of burn, or Paradox has 2 turns to draw some sort of burn.
Yeah, because this Flame Stoker Shepherd's Horn combo is going to be so much life gain that I don't know that Paradox is going to be able to come back. And then we see double Flame Stoker. So Paradox needs to draw burn right now, and he misses it. He has 1 more turn. Shatterglass Mage kills a Horn, which is useful, but still.
Or the Flame Stoker, which is probably more useful at this point, seeing as like you just need to have the extra health there. Okay, the Shatterglass Mage does come down. It warps off the top. It destroys either the Infernus or the Horn, and he picks up. I think the Flame Stoker is probably the right choice here, just because you need to make sure your opponent doesn't draw that gas. At this point, with the attacks, he's putting Grapefruit to 1. Grapefruit can play a Flame Stoker and a Temple Scribe to stabilize. He's going to have a hard time holding this board. But again, with the second Flame Stoker, he could potentially get that actual bit of health gain out. It's all on Paradox to draw the burn, and if he gets it, that's going to be game. So we're going to be looking to see if that's what happens. Xenon Initiation kills the Shatterglass Mage, getting rid of the Overwhelm like immediately. We've got the Xenon Obelisk down as well. There's no flames. Is there a Flame Stoker down at this point? Yeah, there's 3 relics on the board. So
no, it's an Obelisk.
No, one of them's the Xenon Obelisk. Okay. So that gives Paradox 1 more turn to draw burn before the Flame Stokers come down. Grapefruit still hasn't found a single Overwhelm unit, but the Heart of the Vault knocking some stuff down, definitely getting into the board. And yet another Horn. There's a Heart of the Vault too. Another Horn, but he doesn't have an Overwhelm unit, so he's in some trouble here. He's considering attacking, and like, there's just no life gain at this point without the Flame Stokers. But yet another Shepherd's Horn doesn't help him here because his Overwhelm units are so light. Like, Paradox is just looking for direct damage, and he's losing so hard on board at this point that he needs that direct damage. Predatory Carnosaur doesn't quite do it. Kills the 5/5, doesn't stabilize. If Grapefruit can draw a power off of the Cult Aspirant, that'll certainly do everything that it needs it to do. Yeah, I don't know that he's in very good shape at this point.
I mean, I think Paradox has a few more turns than maybe we said, just because even if he plays the Flame Stoker, he's not going to. He'll go up quite a bit of life, but if Paradox draws a Flame Blast, it won't matter. It'll be doing 12 damage.
Yeah, I mean, there's the potential for the Heart of the Vault to push for a bunch of damage there, but Grapefruit's actually choosing to stay back and be a little bit careful. He doesn't want to lose to just a random unit or like some sort of spell that actually hurts his board. He's really not worried about the Obliterates or the Flame Blast, even though they're definitely the cards that kill him. The Flame Stoker finally comes down. That's 9 life on his next turn, and Paradox does not draw the answer, so that's looking like it's going to be game.
Yep, that's it. He's just down on board next turn, and his hand is all power. I don't know that Grapefruit had space to play Flame Stoker earlier, but yeah, definitely kept him in a risky position, and Paradox just never saw the burn.
Yeah, it was a rough board all around. Grapefruit played as though the Obliterate wasn't going to come, and it didn't come. So that worked out pretty well for him, and the Horton deck wins a round. We are now 1-1, and this could be anybody's game at this point.
Yeah, absolutely. I thought both players played that really well. Grapefruit really needed to. I mean, he was just dead to an Obliterate, right? You don't play around a card that you can't play around, and so I think he took the right line. And Paradox, he maybe invested a little hard in that strategy, but I think it was a risk worth taking. It just didn't pay off.
Yeah, I would have liked to see the Infernus out of Grapefruit just a little bit earlier if he could get that Flame Stoker down. There may have been one turn where it was possible, but it was certainly a risk if your opponent picked up a Predatory Carnosaur. But seeing as Predatory Carnosaur is like a 2-of in the deck, I feel like that's slightly lower percentage than getting the Infernus down and just hoping for the best. Possibly, though, like there were ways in which that could have gone wrong for him. Certainly Heart of the Vault could have cleared out like one of his little 1-drops. And yeah, he never managed to secure himself against the Obliterate until he had already secured the board. But it turned out that securing the board was all he needed to do. There was no Obliterate, there was no Flame Blast, so that worked out pretty well for him.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think players are getting into game 3 here, so I'm excited to see how this matchup ends. How do you feel about the Dawnwalker Displacer hand on Paradox's side versus what Grapefruit has?
I don't love Praxis Displacers against Praxis Midrange. Like, I think that it's really good if you're pushing for damage, but Paradox does not have an insane amount of damage push in this deck. And really, like, what tends to end up happening here is you see a lot of, like, sort of value grind. Grapefruit's deck is very good at recovering health, so, like, if he can actually get even like 1 or 2 overwhelm units down into the Shepherd's Horn, like that really just starts the clock and basically resets things in a way that Praxis Displacer is really not helping Paradox out with. Paradox, with his Praxis midrange list, can generate more value if he maybe ditches the Praxis Displacers. I'm not terribly fond of them in this hand.
Yeah, I think Praxis Displacer is a card you want to draw later in the game after you have a developed board. You remove a key blocker and then get yourself lethal, at which point it's basically just teleport. Praxis Displacer loses a lot of value in a deck like Praxis Midrange versus something like Shimmer Pack where you have obelisks. But, you know, it's still good. And he can always Praxis Displacer his own Heart of the Vault for value, so you never know.
Yep, it's certainly nice to get your own Heart of the Vault back. Last time around, he had to use it on his opponent's Heart of the Vaults, and that ended up drawing his opponent quite a few cards and pushing him into the late game a little bit earlier than intended. Grapefruit putting a Xenon Initiation on the Dawnwalker. That sets up his Dawnwalker to be a pretty consistent value machine against the Temple Scribes, Initiates, and Praxis Displacers in this deck. Paradox seeing his Heart of the Vault a little bit early. It's always good to see the Heart of the Vault on top of the deck, even if you can't play it. That's a very important card in this matchup.
So I think Grapefruit might be favored here. Heart of the Vault is going to come down in probably 2 turns. Paradox does have the 5th power, and he only needs to draw the 6th power, and he's got 2 turns to do it. But I think Waystone Infuser might end up holding the board for long enough and getting Grapefruit the card draw he needs to sort of start taking over the game. Paradox can just obliterate it though, so we'll see.
Yeah, it's very likely to get obliterated the turn it comes out, but if it draws him a power, that's a pretty decent deal. Grapefruit playing 2 Temple Scribes here to sort of set up, and picking up a Xenon Obelisk as well. If he can play that down and get his Waystone Infuser above obliterate range, that's going to be a really big problem for Paradox.
Paradox returning the killer Temple Scribe back to his hand, which is pretty exciting.
Yeah, Praxis Displacer here, yeah, just doesn't do a whole lot, but it certainly helps out with the extra bit of card draw and killing off the smaller blockers so that you can get your Heart of the Vaults across a little bit faster.
So he plays the Heart of the Vault, which is going to give Grapefruit time to play Obelisk next turn, which is going to put Waystone Infuser out of obliterate range.
We will see Waystone Infuser come out of obliterate range. We see the Temple Scribes going down, and the Dawnwalker's coming back in under Paradox's hand. Grapefruit, of course, has the killer Dawnwalker in his Void, so if he can find some sort of big unit, and he's got Flamestokers every turn coming up eventually, that's going to be a bit of a problem. Now,
yeah, so go ahead.
One thing that Paradox can do here is attack into the Waystone Infuser and then obliterate it. He knows that Grapefruit didn't play a power this turn with a Waystone Infuser on board, so if he attacks into the Waystone Infuser and then obliterates it, Grapefruit won't get his 6th power. It's guaranteed. So if he obliterates here, that's going to put Grapefruit at a significant disadvantage, where he's just not able to play Heart of the Vaults, and he's facing down 10 damage on board. Paradox may already have this game sealed up.
Yeah, and I really like that play because the Praxis Displacer wasn't really going to get value as a 3-2 on this board. And it just pushes through tons of damage, makes Grapefruit really unlikely to be able to cast the cards in his hand. I mean, he doesn't know exactly what's in Grapefruit's hand, but he does know it's a deck full of 6-drops. And now Grapefruit's just facing down lethal because that Torch takes care of that killer Dawnwalker.
Yeah, he's in pretty bad shape. Sandstorm Titan brings back the Dawnwalker, and then he's at 1 health once again, which means that he's going to have a really rough time. Yeah, the Friendly Wisp plus the Sandstorm Titan is card draw, but it looks like with the Obliterate, that's probably going to be game.
Absolutely, and Paradox takes it. The burn just being a little more valuable than the Shepherd's Horn Flamestoker thing. I don't think we ever really saw a single Infernus, did we?
No, one of them never got played. The Shatterglass Mage was played on the first Infernus. It's a hard card to cast, to be certain, but if you can get into the late game, it can be very effective. Basically, Grapefruit's problem there was that he never got his Shepherd's Horns on his third hand, and that's definitely one of the risks of the deck. It's really hard to actually get those Shepherd's Horns down and get the overwhelm units to gain the necessary life to make them worth it. Like with the cost reduction, there's certainly some value there, but he didn't have that many overwhelm units in the deck in the first place, and the Shepherd's Horns just didn't end up being terribly helpful for him, except in round 2, which was really, really good for him then. Paradox's Burn deck pushes through, and we are going to be seeing that one moving on. So we are going to be moving on to our next round of the Swiss pretty shortly.
Yeah, I just want to do a quick reminder. We have the 2-day mid-year coming up and the World Championships, which once again has a $3,000 prize pool, which is pretty exciting. First place even gets $1,000 all to their own. And if you're trying to get into that tournament, the way to qualify is by winning or placing well in these open tournaments that we have every weekend, which can qualify you into an invitational, which we have every 2 months. And if you place well in invitationals or win an invitational, you'll be invited to Worlds. And even if you don't get invited, that's okay, because it's all going to be streamed live, and it's going to be super exciting to see some of the best players in Eternal duke it out for the biggest prize pool we've ever seen.
Pretty spectacular. Looking forward to either casting or playing in that thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we've got some fun VODs for you, and we'll be back with round 4 after these.
Yeah, see you guys then.